U.S. marriage rate reached its lowest level in over a century. That's according to the National Center for Health Statistics. For every 1,000 people, there are just 6.5% new marriages, a rate that's even lower than during the Great Depression. And keep in mind, this is 2018 data.
Right. So before the pandemic, and there are concerns that the marriage rate will continue to fall as the coronavirus crisis bears down. Director of the National Marriage Project at the University of Virginia, Brad Wilcox, weighs in now via Skype on the broader implications of that marriage rate decline. Great to have you, Brad. Thanks for being with us.
Good to be here, Krystal.
Can you just take us through what the trends have been over time?
Well, we've seen variations in marriage related to both the economy and the culture. Obviously, we saw a pretty big decline in the wake of the Great Depression, and then an uptick after World War II. And more recently, in the wake of the 70s, we've seen a gradual decline kind of going across the U.S. more generally.
And Brad, what do we owe this decline in marriage to? Is it economic conditions? That seems to be one of the things that was cited in some of the analysis that I'd read, is that people simply just can't afford to get married, that they might have cohabitation, but that the price of marriage is essentially becoming a luxury good in American society.
Well, Saagar, that's certainly part of the story. What we do see is that men who are employed with decent paying jobs are more likely to get and stay married. So that's certainly part of the story here, is the economy matters. But the culture has also shifted, I think. We've seen in recent polling that young adults think that having a job and money are more important for their fulfillment than is marriage. And yet the data tell us a very different story. Marriage is a much more powerful predictor of our meaning and happiness than is how much money we make or the kind of job that we have.
Mm-hmm. Doesn't it seem, though, a little bit a little bit presumptuous to say, basically, we know better. You may think that you want to privilege your job or these other parts of your life over a marriage, but we know better. Trust us. You should get married.
Well, Krystal, there are obviously always exceptions. There are some people who are not, going to get married, and that's perfectly fine. But I'm just saying, on average, what we see is that Americans who get married are much more likely to be thriving emotionally and also financially. And even amidst this pandemic, what we're seeing is that Americans who are married are about 50% less likely to report that they're lonely compared to Americans who are single. So there's this a lot of good kind of go with marriage that I think people are losing sight of today in this culture and in this economy as well.
And I think let's focus on the economic part, too, because, I think obviously there's going to be disagreements on culture. But to Krystal's point, it seems to be that the economy and policy definitely favors one type of option over the other in terms of our wages, in terms of the types of jobs that we subsidize or promote as a society.
Yeah, it's really true. I think that we have done a good job of basically making the upper middle class get access to marriage through the kinds of work and income that they can achieve. And we've done, I think, a much worse job giving working class adults the access and opportunities that they need both educationally and professionally to kind of reach that financial foundation that will allow them to go ahead and both get married and then later in life stay married.
And so what does that mean in terms of policy? Because I do see the right focusing a lot more on marriage and on family, but I don't necessarily see the policy ideas coming out of the right to sort of back and support the institution. So what would be some of your recommendations to policymakers?
So, Krystal, I think you're right. And what I would say is we need to do a much better job in the educational system of improving vocational education and apprenticeship training for working class young adults so they have the financial foundation as they move into the employment sector to go ahead and marry. I think we also should be thinking, too, about wage subsidies as a way of strengthening the economic fortunes of working class families. So, again, we need to think about the way in which strong marriages depend both on culture and economics. And the right tends to focus on culture, the left on economics. And we need both these two pillars to be stronger if we wish to revive the fortunes of marriage in America today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's the most important point, which is that, the government can only really control one of those things, and it's economics. Brad, thank you for your analysis on this really important topic. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on today.
Mm-hmm. All right, we'll have more Rising for you after this.